crossing the Channel have values that are at odds with British norms. Some saying racist, others saying absolutely right. What says you? And policing. Apparently the government has met its targets to recruit 20,000 new officers. Is that going to be what we need then to give us the common sense policing that Suella Braverman so desperately says we need? If it's not, what else do we need to happen in this country to get our policing on track? And private schools, they've started to increase their fees because of inflation, and what you're seeing is parents having to remove their children. Is this a warning shot, if you like, to Keir Starmer, whose policy would be to add VAT to the fees of private schools? He says it's all about levelling up, about really hitting the rich. I say it's about attempting to tax aspiration. What says you? And PETA, the animal rights charity, is saying that if you eat fish, you know, fish and chips, that great British treat, it's akin, if you like, to eating your own pets. Cats? What? Honestly, I really do say this often, but sometimes I feel this world is going mad. But worry not. With a bit of a dose of sanity, we'll get into it all. But before we do, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The first flight carrying British nationals evacuated from Sudan has landed in the UK this afternoon. It's unclear how many people were on board, but we do know more than 300 people have been evacuated from the country so far. It's estimated around 4,000 people were stuck there. Hundreds of people have been killed since fighting between the Sudanese military and rival paramilitary forces broke out more than a fortnight ago. A 72-hour ceasefire is currently holding, but the Prime Minister's warned the next 24 hours are crucial as British forces race to rescue more people before it ends. Asked whether the government would also introduce safe routes for refugees, Suella Braverman said not.
We have no plans to do that. Our focus, first and foremost, right now, and bearing in mind this is a fast-moving situation and a complex situation, is to support British nationals and their dependents.
Well, Rosen Ahmed, who was forced to make her own way out of Sudan, spoke to GBNews earlier about her journey out of the country.
It isn't easy. It isn't safe. It's a massive, massive risk to go out on the streets and drive and attempt to move in the midst of war. And it's also not cheap. It's very expensive. So it was a harrowing journey.
Now, the MP Andrew Bridgen has told GBNews this afternoon he's very disappointed that the Conservative Party has leaked details of his expulsion. It happened on the 12th of April on a recommendation from a disciplinary panel. And that's after he questioned the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines in a retweeted comparison of the government's rollout to the Holocaust. Clinical trials have shown COVID vaccines are effective and safe. Mr Bridgen said he will stand at the next election and he's hit out at what he calls corruption and cover-ups in politics.
I barely recognise the Conservative Party at the moment. We seem to have moved away from being a party that legislates for the people to a party that legislates against the people. Surely I've got the right to free speech to express the genuine and legitimate concerns of my constituents about the safety and efficacy of experimental vaccines which were never tested properly.
The Met Police Commissioner has said the force has not reached its recruitment target, saying they are about 1,000 police officers short at the moment. But more than 20,000 new police officers have been hired in England and Wales. Britain's biggest police force missing its individual target. The ongoing recruitment programme is costing about £18.5 billion over the next decade. And the Prime Minister has said that although progress is good, more work is needed. Mr Rowley says the Met's shortfall is partly down to the force's current reputation.
I wish we'd hit it, but we haven't.
Why haven't you?
So I think there are a range of factors in this. We have recruited over the last 3 years more than 9,000 officers, which is the most I think ever in such a short period. We haven't hit the target. Obviously, we are striving to maintain the quality. That's really important. I think there are factors which include both, I think the reputation of the organisation at the moment doesn't help recruiting.
International news, and the leaders of Ukraine and China have held a telephone call for the first time since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. Chinese state broadcasters say President Xi Jinping told Volodymyr Zelensky he's prepared to send special representatives to Ukraine to start peace talks. President Xi is the most powerful world leader to have refrained so far from denouncing Russia's invasion, making a state visit to Russia to meet President Putin just last month. Well, since February, he's been promoting what he calls a 12-point peace plan. Meanwhile, the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny says an investigation has opened that could see him serve an extra 30 years in jail. Mr. Navalny, who's currently serving 11 and a half years in jail, is being investigated on terrorism charges, which he calls absurd. He survived an assassination attempt in 2020 after being poisoned. The Kremlin denies any involvement. A man has been jailed for assisting 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell's murderer. 41-year-old Paul Russell pleaded guilty to driving Thomas Cashman after he'd fatally shot the 9-year-old girl in Liverpool last summer. He told police in the days after Olivia's death that Cashman was responsible for her murder, claiming he had not been aware of this when he helped Cashman out. He's been sentenced to 22 months in prison. And just lastly, the High Court has heard a claim that the King and Queen Consort's phone calls were intercepted by the publisher of The Sun in the 1990s. The Duke of Sussex made the allegation in his claim against News Group newspapers. He's suing them over what he's calling unlawful information gathering. Prince Harry's lawyers claim the group hacked phone calls, messages and obtained phone bills of Charles and Camilla. Stories allegedly published in The Sun as a result had the headlines "Heir to the Phone" and "The Midnight Caller." The hearing is expected to finish tomorrow. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Alex Dean is a political consultant and John McTernan is a strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome back. And you know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home tonight. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Should we get straight in there to our top story tonight? Some of the most senior ministers in the government have been accused of outright racism. I've got to be honest, though, when are they not, quite frankly? Anyway, but this time it's for their language around small bird migrants. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the values and lifestyles of some of those people crossing the Channel are a threat to social cohesion within this country. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has backed those remarks, basically, and said that indeed some illegal migrants have values at odds with her own and suggests that they were connected to heightened levels of criminality. Outraged. I tell you, some people are absolutely outraged. Are you one of them, Alex?
No, I'm not. I think the days when political opponents could say to somebody, "You're racist," and that for meant that they won the debate, whatever it was that had been said, are long past. That trope is exhausted, people have seen through it, and people actually try to evaluate for themselves whether or not the thing that's been said is offensive or racist or not. And in this example, if you think about it, paying people smugglers thousands of pounds is contrary to British values. Coming to a country without the permission of that country, after all, we should decide who comes to this country and the manner in which they come. And the extent to which somebody thinks differently to that, I suggest is not an election-winning proposition, is contrary to the values of this country. And jumping the queue is profoundly contrary to the values of this country. So, no, I don't think they are racist. I don't even think that they're wrong in the slightest to point this out. I think they're saying absolutely what their electors think. And I'll go one further. Suella Braverman didn't just say this about small boats. She also said it about the systematic unwillingness to point out the obvious connection between people abusing children in paedophile rings in towns around England who all had the same heritage and background, and said that facts and truth can't be racist.
John, your thoughts?
Generic is... it's not a dog whistle, is it? It's like a foghorn shouting at the British electors to say, are you racist? Come and vote for us in the local elections. It's an act of desperation to use the rhetoric of the EDL and bring it in to a ministerial speech, a speech that must have been approved of by Suella Braverman, that must have been signed off by Number 10. So this rancid, racist language is the language
is
of
rancid
this government.
and racist that's been said?
To say that the values and the lifestyle of a Sudanese child trying to come to Britain to escape the civil war is not British.
But you're deliberately picking out Sudanese child because, I mean, the number of Sudanese children that are making those channel crossings will be minimal, you know, if any. Very small numbers.
Robert Jenrick is saying foreigners who are mainly people of colour who are choosing to come to Britain because they love our country, which is the most British value of all. They love our respect for freedom.
Why would they love a country if it was rancid and racist?
But no, it's the rancid and racist government we've got with the rancid and racist language. There's nothing wrong with this country. They're getting rid of the racist government wouldn't make better.
That's extraordinary to me, because, first of all, you deliberately lied over the fact he said some, to choose the person that you think is the most attractive for your case, the new Sudanese child. Had Robert Jenrick...
He didn't give some...
He did, he said some. He said some people. And had he said the Sudanese children trying to come to this country are abominable or whatever, as you just suggested he did, I would be on your side.
We all know what he
but more, no, we don't.
You meant the black and brown people.
No, we don't. And that is what I meant about this tired trope. And some people still think that something that if you threw it at somebody in the 90s, if you're working for Blair and you threw it at somebody, it probably would work. You're a racist, ha-ha, I win. It's not true anymore. People will think about it and listen to it.
It's not racism.
And the amazing thing is, you've gone from twisting what he said about an individual to painting an entire government as racist and rancid. People see through this, John. It's not going to work anymore.
Well, no. If you want to bring the former National Front, the old BNP, and EDL vote, the fragments on the far right of British politics to support the Tory party, be my guest. Go for all money. But this kind of language is hated by ordinary British people.
Do you know who sees through it the most? That's amazing. Ordinary British people. It's working class people in this country who look at
black or brown.
Who want to. Yes, of course. And they're very often the people who have the biggest question over illegal immigration are those in the last generation who came here lawfully and see people jumping the queue.
No refugees
it's not
are
about
illegal.
Concern about migration.
Refugees cannot be illegal.
Yes, of course they can.
No, they can't.
Yes, of course they can. Those whose claims are found to be false. Those whose claims are found to be false and have paid people smugglers to come here are amongst the very worst sort of people who ignore any form of due process and try to come here through people smugglers. Well, that's where you're wrong. And the extent this is the farce of your position, in which makes a mockery of international law, is the belief that people who pay, to come across an entire continent to come to the UK, you're supposed to pretend they're still fleeing danger. Absurd. And the extent to which international law protects your position, it's wrong too.
International law does protect my position because there is no such thing as an illegal refugee.
So where
you have the right to come to our country and apply for safety here. We take such a small number of refugees across the whole of Europe, let alone the whole of the world. There are millions and millions of refugees, almost all of whom live close to their own country because they hope to go back there. The people who want to come to our country come for noble reasons because they respect the values our country stands for. Let's question that assertion of noble reasons.
I agree with you we should take more, and I agree with you that we should have more open routes so that people can apply. You are openly supportive of people paying people smugglers to come across an entire continent and still pretend they're desperate. No, they're not.
How desperate?
If they were desperate, they'd apply in a country before they got to the Channel, wouldn't they?
Because they're desperate, they pay.
They're desperate to come from France.
Want to rejoin their family members over here.
Why isn't France? That's preference. That's preference, not desperation. Why, if they're desperate, if they're so desperate as you say, why don't they apply in France?
I would love every single asylum seeker to be processed in France, to be able to apply to British Home Office representatives in France, be properly dealt with there, and then be brought to Britain.
You haven't answered.
John, you're not answering his question.
If they're desperate, why don't they apply to the French?
Same reason we don't live in France. they like the UK.
That's preference, not desperation.
I love the UK, and I think it's really strange.
You allied constantly between desperation and preference.
A Tory government who are meant to love our country have contempt for people who express the deepest love for our country you could ever do.
I'll give you one more go, John. It's very obvious you're unwilling to answer because you're deliberately crossing over between desperation, which is what you use to defend your position, and preference, which is what you switch to when I ask you about the desperation. If they're desperate, why don't they apply for asylum in France?
People want to come here from Afghanistan, from Iraq.
Isn't
from
France
Iran, from Sudan, they'll be coming. And they want to come here, and Somaliland and Somalia, and it's because the British Empire went to those countries, and some of the people who've not been able to come from Afghanistan served our country as security, as translators. They were abandoned. This government preferred to get pets, cats and dogs out of Afghanistan rather than people who'd worked with us.
That's a very strong moral argument for accepting more refugees. And you know what? I said we should take more people from Afghanistan. But if people are coming to this country across the Channel,
our country went to theirs.
Why don't they apply, if they're desperate, as you say, why don't they apply for asylum in France? What's wrong with France?
What's wrong with France? It's not Britain. I wouldn't want to live in France. I want to live in Britain. Britain's the greatest country in the world, apart from the government it's got at the moment.
Can I just drill down on this notion, that bring it back to this point about racism? Because what you were just saying earlier on is that you feel like this narrative is a foghorn. It's not dogwas, it's foghorn. Yeah. And it's basically devised to turn us around against black and brown people, your words. But how does that fit then with us having a brown-skinned Prime Minister, a brown-skinned Home Secretary? How does that fit with what you're telling me, that these brown leaders want to turn me as a white person against brown people?
You've got a government, the very white, the kind of the white bread, Robert Jenrick, who made this speech.
I'm not asking you about Robert Jenrick.
No,
I'm asking. You're saying the government is racist. So I'm asking you.
Of course, this government's racist. The way that they're trying to make miserable people, desperate people. Even
Suella Braverman,
the most diverse
a
cabinet
brown
in history.
lady, married to a Jewish person, you're saying that these remarks that she makes as an ethnic minority is devised to turn white people against brown and black people?
It's a racist foghorn to use immigration.
How do you square that circle, though, that this person herself is a brown lady?
Because this government are so unpopular and so desperate to cling to power, they will do anything. And what they've seen from the focus groups, clearly from the focus groups, is that the EDL supporters and the BNP supporters will vote Conservative if they hear this language.
Do you think...
They don't believe, either the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary do not for 1 second believe they're going to do this. But if they were going to do this, what they're saying is, if you come as a child, unaccompanied, to our country, 5,000 came last year, those 5,000 children will be put behind wire until they're adults.
John, you made the point.
Once they become adults, they'll be thrown out of the country. That is the thing that's destroying our values.
There comes a time when you clearly have to look at somebody and say, I can see that you think you have morality on your side, and that therefore you can say whatever you like about people. You can call them racist, you can smear them, you can say because they are wrong, you're so tolerant, you can no longer tolerate another perspective. I get that. But I think it's wrong, but I understand. When you look at a government and you see it made up of Rishi Sunak, James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, and say, look at that bunch of racists, the most diverse cabinet in history, it takes a truly perverse perspective, distorted by that sense of absolute moral righteousness to think that you're right.
I judge people by their words and by their actions. And the actions of the immigration system are both incompetent, racist and vile. But the words that say that brown and black people coming to our country...
those are your words.
No, they're threatening our values and lifestyles.
Those people didn't say brown and black people.
No, of course
they will have meant as much the law-breaking Albanians coming here whilst Albania is safe.
He didn't say brown and black. He doesn't need to say brown and black.
You really didn't,
That's the point.
I mean, honestly. You're the absolute arbiter of what people said. We should have you on after every interview to explain why they're bigoted and racist.
I would be an excellent interpreter of the government.
One of the things that I dislike about this whole kind of labelling everything as racist...
Well, it's only racist things I label racist.
It's because it reminds me of the whole Brexit conversation, where there was a lot of people, particularly in working class communities, the same communities that are having these vast kind of migrant placements put among them. It's those kind of people that are sitting there going, hang on a second, we're small towns, small villages, whatever. We're suddenly having hundreds and hundreds of people placed into our local area. They're concerned about integration and all the rest of it. Calling those concerns racist, for me, echoes back to the Brexit conversation, where people that wanted to leave the European Union and have sovereignty from Westminster as opposed to Brussels, that was called racist as well. So isn't it just the case that actually if you don't like the policy, it's just a quick and easy way, and almost as an attempt to silence conversation, because any decent-minded person doesn't want to be called a racist. A racist is an awful thing. Most people are not racist. So when you start pointing fingers going, you racist, you racist, you racist, I would put it to you that a lot of people do so in order to silence that opinion simply because they just do not like it.
Like if it's racist, I'll call it out for being racist. This government is racist. Their immigration policy is racist.
Do you think Brexit was racist?
The bill going through, I think some of the people who supported Brexit were racist, of course. I think Brexit was a choice. It was the wrong choice. It was a stupid choice.
John, have you wondered about the crossover on the Venn diagram between things that are racist and things with which John McTernan disagrees?
Have you? Have you ever pondered that?
No.
He's got a good question. Well, I'll tell you what.
It's a pretty big bullseye in the middle.
I'll give you a couple of minutes to ponder it then if you want. What do you make to all this at home? Do you agree with some of the statements that the likes of Suella have been making? Or are you more in John's camp and think, God, what a racist bunch of so-and-so's, awful country this is, that everyone so desperately seems to... Well, it's the awful government that you're saying, racist government, that presides over the country that all these people seem to be wanting to get into. Anyway, your thoughts, keep them coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'll be reading some of those out in 2. When I come back, I also want to talk to you about policing. Apparently, we've hit most of the targets to recruit that 20,000. Is this what we need then to sort out policing in this country? I'm so disappointed.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. You're listening to GB News Radio.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Alex Dean is a political consultant and John McTernan is a strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. Lots of you guys getting in touch tonight. Lots of them disagreeing with you. It won't surprise you, perhaps.
If it's any consolation, when I'm on the beeb, it's the other way around. So, you know.
Well, Jim says Jennifer is right. I mean, you go on and say that, but in essence, your point is you're saying it's right. Peter says this country is finished. It's so overcrowded. We've got housing shortages and so on and so forth. They are completely right, says Gilly, not in the least bit racist. Marianne says Braverman is only saying what the majority of people actually think. Well, keep your thoughts coming in. Sticking though, shall we, with Suella Braverman. She's been giving quite a big speech today, this time on policing. She's appealed to the police to return to common sense and focus on fighting crime. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? She's also said that there was a perception that some police officers are on the side of militant protesters. John McTernan, I know you're going to start saying about police cuts and hiring and all the rest of it, and we shall come to that, I am sure. But in essence, about the way that the police are policing, do you think they've got their priorities right?
Well, the police are utterly dreadful. There's no doubt about that. The Met employ rapists.
What, all of them?
The Met employ rapists, misogynists and murderers. Outside London, you've struggled to find anybody who ever has a burglary investigated. You simply get a police, here's a crime number, go and claim it on your insurance. Goodness knows what the police are doing. The numbers are down, but goodness knows what they're doing. They've not adapted to the pattern of what crime is. They can't stop young people being stabbed, they can't stop young women being sexually assaulted, and they can't stop middle-aged people suffering from fraud and cybercrime in their homes. They clearly haven't adapted to the modern world. And the idea that the solution to more complex crime, more fraud-based crime and all these things, that the solution to that is to actually get stupider police officers on the beat, which is what Suella Braverman's policy is.
I do need to...
It's crazy. We need a graduate profession for the 21st century.
I need to pick you up on this. I don't agree with the graduate thing anyway, we'll come back to that. But when you talk about, stupider people on the beat and all this, I actually find that very disrespectful because to go into the police force in this day and age, I think it takes an incredibly brave person to get on the end of a 999 call, run towards danger, the kind of danger that most sane-minded people would run 100 miles an hour the opposite direction from, when you've got your own family, your own kids and all the rest of it. I think that those people are, in the main, brave, decent people. So when I hear you kind of tarring them all with this awful brush, calling them stupid and racist, and I find that quite offensive on behalf of anyone. And you might be watching, listening. Are you a serving police officer or a former police officer? What do you make to him?
Suella Braverman wants to drop the standard. She's saying people don't need a degree. I mean, that is ridiculous.
And what are you telling me that? Are you telling me that you can only have something about you? You can only be intelligent if you've got a degree?
I think, but you shouldn't be encouraging people to leave school. You need to be staying at school.
What about the many people that already have? I mean, it's just, there's about 35%.
I think that's very smacks of snobbery, I have to say. Sorry, I know you're keen to come in, but this whole notion of everyone's got to have a degree and you're not intelligent if you don't have a degree, I think that's ridiculous.
Well, I suppose that was the kernel of what I was going to say, that a university qualification is not the sole thing that makes someone's life worthwhile or mean that they've got something to contribute. Indeed, the police are seeking to attract many people mid-career, and on John's perspective, unless he wants them to go back to university for 3 years, having been in some other profession for a while, it seems to me you're stymieing their ability to be a practising police officer who may contribute something positive. I agree with some of John's assertions, though, for other reasons. It's not about the degree thing, which I think is pretty ridiculous. In the same, I don't think you need a degree to walk the beat any more than you need a degree necessarily to be a nurse in a hospital. I think that There's many other forms of training short of the academic qualification that is a degree that means people can do those jobs. I think there are things wrong with the police because of their structure, because of their disciplinary processes, and because they've dropped other standards. Not the academic one, the fitness standards, which have basically been abandoned, which is why you see people waddling around like they're the paramilitary wing of the Guardian, festooned with lycra, their hands stuffed up in the vest like this. We've all seen it. You know, stuff coming off them like they're about to go on some geriatric equivalent of an SAS raid. That's part of the problem with the police. The second part of the problem is that the structure of the forces on our county positions means we've got some tiny ones and some absolutely enormous ones. I love counties, but there's not actually a logical reason in the day and age to have that structure, especially with all the overlapping leadership that it has. And the third problem is the office disciplinary one, which leads to a major cultural problem with the police. And it's not like this is new. Every time the warning sign comes out, the police say, lessons have been learned, it won't happen again. And invariably, it does. At Hillsborough, the police maintained that Liverpool fans had urinated on officers and picked the pockets of the dead. All lies. The police maintained that the women who were, or girls, I should say, who were reporting themselves being abused on a systemic basis in the north of England were fantasists and racists. Total lies. The Met has been called institutionally racist for the second time. And to demonstrate why they failed to take any kind of responsibility for this sort of thing, the guy who killed Ian Tomlinson, the newspaper seller in the London riots years and years ago, and the footage demonstrating plainly this basic murder, had been thrown out of the Met, joined another police force, come through another process and been allowed back into the Met again. And that's before you get to the officers who stop women walking down the street, show them their warrant card and say, get in my car, rape them and kill them. So the suggestion there's not something wrong with the police, I think, I'm afraid, is not one that's going to stand up to evaluation.
Is there any amount of respect for the police?
Of course, and I'm a Conservative and I want to believe and support the police, and many police officers themselves are decent, honourable people trying to do their best. That's why I said the problem was to do with discipline and to do with structure and to do with culture and fitness standards, not to do with individuals necessarily.
Do you know, I appeal to you. Are you a serving officer, or perhaps you might have retired by now? I'm fascinated to hear what you think, because I don't actually know anyone that is a serving police officer, but I imagine when you hear conversations like this, I wonder what it does to your morale.
Because you've said that, one thing I would say is, if you speak, it's very interesting. I think you've made a rod for your own back, because you've appealed to the thin blue line to come on and say how fine they are. I understood. Then you said former police officers. Very quickly, if you ask former police officers, you'll find the most ready critics of the current environment are those who enforced the law in the past.
Is that true? Are you out there? Will you back that point up from Alex? I shall leave it with you. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can reach me, and I will have some of your responses in too. But I also want to ask you, do you have children in private schools, perhaps? Have you scrimped and saved to put them in there, gone without? What do you think to the notion then that perhaps your fees would increase by 20% if VAT was added to it? Is it a good idea? Do you need to batter those rich people, make everything equal? Or is it going to actually have some silly unintended consequences? Your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Alex Dean is a political consultant and John McTernan is a strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. I've got to say, there isn't a massive amount of love coming from you guys at home towards the police. It surprised me because, yes, I know all the stuff that we criticise and, yes, I know all the points that's been made and all the rest of it, but I just still think, and I guess I still hope, maybe I'm being naive, that on an individual level there is still a sense of respect for police officers.
You just have to look at the way the Met have a proper inquiry, the Casey review, into them. And when it identifies them as being institutionally misogynist, institutionally racist, the Commissioner runs away from the words. And if you run away from the words, you're running away from the actions. The problem is we do need a refoundation of the police. I think the modern police force can only police with the consent and the confidence of the public. They've lost the confidence. And it's no good saying people should be confident. You have to find ways to rebuild that confidence. And I think that's a thing that should be bipartisan. That's the Labour and Tory. Everybody should want a good police force that the public trust.
Well, it's both ways, right? It's both on the kind of...
You'll have to hold your ways because I want to move on to talk about schools in a minute. But before I do, Alex says, I am a serving police sergeant. The state of policing is utterly chaotic. It's the red tape that needs to be immediately removed and we should be allowed to carry out common sense policing. He says, we record literally everything and consider, now we're considered a one-stop shop for all societal issues, and that is what has to change quickly. By the way, Alex, get back in touch there. Just tell me, what is your morale like? Because I do take your points, but I'm fascinated about morale as well. I want to talk about schools. I know that Alex is itching to come back in, but if I don't, I might see if I can squeeze your police point back in towards the end of the programme. But for now, something caught my eye this morning. It was something in the Telegraph, actually, which says that private schools, some of them have been increasing their fees by as much as 19%, right? It's basically prompted a load of families to move their kids out of the private school and put them into the state sector. And then it immediately started me thinking, well, hang on a second, because Keir Starmer, you might be familiar with, has a bit of a plan to put VAT onto private school fees. So surely, isn't this a bit of a warning sign as to what would come, John?
Look, school fees are going up anyway because of inflation. I think it's right for Keir Starmer to say, you can have private schools. We should have the choice for parents. You can have private schools. You can buy the privilege for your kids. You can buy the social networks for your kids. But let's have tax on it, VAT on it, like other goods and services. And that is fair. Will that have an impact? Well, it depends whether the schools are providing value for money. But people who want to buy the social access, who want to buy the networks, who want to buy the privilege, they will still scrimp and save. And I think the money can be used for state schools.
I'm itching to come back at you, but I know Alex wants to come and go, Alex.
Well, I don't have children myself, and people often accuse Conservatives being rampant individualists, and therefore I should say, yeah, it's good, let's tax them more and people like me will benefit. Actually, I think that people having the choice to educate their children in different places is good. I also think that people voluntarily paying twice is good. They pay their taxes, which goes to pay for the state system, then they pay again to take their child out of the state system, relieve the state system of the burden of that education and educate them somewhere else. So when you squeeze that private sector, you put a burden back onto the state system and deprive yourself of that double payment. And so for me, I think Starmer, by dint of a class sort of a chip on the shoulder, which he plainly doesn't feel, but he perhaps, it's a bit like John saying that he thought the Conservatives were dog whistling in the last segment. Well, this, I suppose, is the Labour dog whistle, right? Starmer doesn't feel this himself. In fact, he probably feels like he's got to show he's a man of the people and go on about how much he likes football and wants to shove it up the toffs like him. So, you know, I suppose it's a bit of demonstration like that. But I would actually make school fees partially tax deductible. I'd give people a rebate, not the whole amount, nothing like it, but just to make it a little easier and show that the state approves of it, approves of you dipping into your pocket to support the education of your children above and beyond what you pay in tax.
I don't like this policy of the 20%, and I'll tell you for why, because to me, it's this kind of virtue signalling, look, working classes, look at us, we will tax the big fat cats, the rich people, you know, we'll sort them right out. But you won't actually, because those rich people, they can suck up a 20% increase in school fees. It's not going to affect them at all. The people that will be affected by this, John, are those working class people, those strivers now that have gone without cars, gone without holidays, gone without whatever it is, to prioritise the education of their child to better their life. They've got an aspiration for their family. And it is that person that I think that this policy directly seeks to hit. To Alex's point, it makes no financial sense anyway, because all these people are going to do is go and become then a drain on the state system instead. And it just makes no sense to me. It's just a virtue signalling attack on aspiration.
The state system is underfunded massively after 10 years, 13 years of the Tory government. Teachers are underpaid. That's why there are shortages. That's why there'll never be the maths teachers to implement the policy Rishi Sunak tried to announce last week. We've got a huge issue. We have to invest. The 21st century is a century of knowledge, the knowledge economy. It requires higher skills. It requires more people to go to university. I support David Willett's idea that 75% of kids should go to university.
How ridiculous.
75?
How absolutely ridiculous.
Good grief.
So what you want to do is just devalue a degree to the point where pretty much everyone's got them, but everyone's now saddled with debt, so they're not a point of difference at all.
A lot of people have the ability to go to university, more than still getting in places. So I would expand university education. You need the best and the brightest to be educated for as long and as well as you can. But in this case,
I think you are very snobby when it comes to education. I think you're very elitist in what you're saying. We need the best and the brightest, basically, to stay within an educational framework for as long as possible.
I don't think that's fair.
Why can't they be out and be entrepreneurial?
I don't think that's fair. No. Educating people better is a laudable aim, but the idea necessarily that means university, that's where you lose me. And the Blairite in government enjoys the notion of such high numbers of people going to university because it's a mask on unemployment. But actually, it's an increasingly expensive plaster over unemployment, given the debt with which people emerge from university now saddled with. When I was at university, fees were, when I started university, there was no fee. I was in that generation that straddled. There was no fee and student loans were reasonable. Now, there are high fees and student loan interest is completely unreasonable. Right? We've done that in a single generation. And the big issue isn't between the classes, it's between the generations. People my age, we as a country, and it well predated the advent of the Conservative Party's time in government. Indeed, John, let me remind you that the Conservative Party's position on tuition fees went in favour, against, in favour. I know some contortionists who believed in the party line throughout, by the way. I've never quite understood how they managed it. But anyway, I've always been in favour of tuition fees, but not to the extent they are, and certainly not the eye-gouging interest that are imposed on student debt once you start paying it back.
75% of young people at university. What do you make to that? I just think it's absolutely silly What about apprenticeships? What about people that just want to go off and be entrepreneurs and all the rest of it? I do not understand this desperate need to judge people based on whether they've a 2-1 or a first and which degree. I think it's absolute nonsense, and I think all that happens is the degree then just becomes a filtering mechanism, and you'll need one to fry chips in McDonald's or something, because it just lowers the value of them. Let me know your thoughts. When I come back, gosh, so much more. I know there's comments that you want to make on one of the earlier topics. Lots of you guys have been in touch about the police and about schools. I want to touch on that. And if I can as well, I want to also ask you, do you think we need to eat less fish? That's a bit of a random one, isn't it? But tell me your thoughts. And by the way, do you think eating fish is similar to eating your pet cat? This world has gone mad. See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alex Dean is alongside me, the political consultant, as is John McTernan, the strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. Joe says, Michelle, as a mother, daughter, wife and sister of police officers ranging from the very bottom to the very top, your panellist statements are absolutely disgraceful, shocking and offensive. In this era of being nice to everybody, why is it people think they can treat our police with such vile comments? She goes on to tell me her daughter has just left the police after 3 years, and her daughter says people need to walk in a police officer's shoes for a day before they comment.
Doesn't mention why she left.
Well, it does actually, but it does. If you want me to carry on, it's just a very long email. So
OK, all right, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it just say, she's faced frightening and life-threatening situations on a daily basis, along with long 20-hour work days on a weekly basis, all for the take-home pay, she says, of £85 a day after tax. So there was more to it.
Fair enough.
Because of time reasons only, I was just trying to squish it all in. Jay says, my daughter sends her son to a private school. She scrimps and saves and goes without. And doing this gives someone else the choice of the state school that they want. Completely agree. Lots of you getting in touch about this private school one. Ian says, read Michelle Dewsbury. If you went to university, you'd know there wasn't an S in my name. Gone is the girl from Hull, he says. In her stead is a multi-millionaire who only thinks of the rich. What utter tripe. Ian, what I'm actually thinking of is the people that work hard, that are not the multimillionaire rich. They're just your working class strivers. They go without your holidays, your cars and all the rest of it. They make sacrifices in their life to educate their children, to propel their children beyond them. That is who I am thinking about, because your multimillionaire rich people, they don't give a damn if you put 20% on those fees. They can suck it up like... I know this is something I shouldn't have said. But anyway, fish and chips. Britain's favourite tea time treat has caught the eye of animal rights group PETA. Long story short, they put an advert in Cleethorpes. Don't you start laughing, because then you'll start me laughing. They put an advert in Cleethorpes that compares eating a battered fish to eating your pet cat. I know I'm laughing about eating pet cats, and I'm not laughing about eating pet cats. I'm laughing about something that almost slipped out my mouth. I'm too professional. Slipped it back in. He's laughing.
He's not professional. Though.
He's not professional. Look at him.
I'll be back in a minute. It's all right, just leave me.
Every time I have you on.
Just leave.
Right, listen. Pet cats, fish. What do you make to this? Do you think we should... Let's talk sense.
They've got a point.
Who's got a point?
Peter have got a point.
Who's Peter?
PETA.
Peter's the pet cat, eat it right. PETA have got a point.
The campaigners have got a point.
Right.
We all need to eat less meat, ideally no meat, and we all need to eat only sustainable fish.
Right.
And if you wouldn't eat, in the end, meat eaters do have to confront the issue. If you're not willing to kill an animal before you eat it, you should hesitate before doing so. You wouldn't kill your pets, because you wouldn't eat your pets. You really
That's
should be
the
careful
advert on the screen, by the way, that I'm showing you.
You should really be careful about the idea that we should be killing in industrial numbers. Cows, pigs, chickens. So I think the sustainable future demands that we eat many fewer animals and much more vegetables, beans, pulses, chickpeas. And look, they're trying to get a shock and a debate going. And look, we're discussing it now. So in the choice between fish and chips and cat and chips, I'd have lentils and chips.
Lentils and chips. Alex, your thoughts?
My view is that there are two things here in contradiction to one another, and they're both on the kind of self-righteous left, so it's rather enjoyable seeing them knock heads against one another. The first is arguing that we should eat less red meat because of the environmental impact, and those people encourage us to eat more fish. Then you've got the out-and-out kind of vegan headbangers who say we should basically eat less of everything, and you should not, unless you're stewing grass, you should be content, and you certainly shouldn't eat any kind of life form. And it's very enjoyable seeing, the provisional wing of PETA going to war with the moderates. I've got pretty much no sympathy with either of them. Well, I understand the moral imperatives that they're talking about, but in my view, those things are up to moral choices we make for ourselves. And if individuals want to do it, then they shall. But I think people should make up their minds for themselves rather than being bullied with images of their domestic animals being skinned by their choices.
Indeed. Mark says, I'm a serving police officer of 28 years and I am disgusted by some of these comments. The police officers are constantly under attack by decisions made by politicians who then blame police for their policies. He goes on to say that some of the best officers and detectives I've ever worked with don't have degrees but rely instead on life experience, etc. He says some of the worst I've ever worked with I've recently joined. Yes, they tick the degree box, but they lack lots of other things. Can I suggest, says Tracy, the gentleman pops to our local Waitrose or other similar stores. There he'll find many young people with huge debt, but yes, they've got a degree, but it doesn't have many practical value, she says. What about improving apprenticeships in all areas? I would completely agree with you about apprenticeships. Do you support apprenticeships?
75% go to university, 25% apprentices. That'd be great.
So you want everyone to carry on in some form of academia?
Carry on.
Well, who's going out being entrepreneurial and creating the business that's going to employ these degree earners then?
I think apprentices and degree graduates can all be entrepreneurial.
What do you think? Someone just said, Michelle, it's very obvious that you don't have a degree. Maybe I'm being a bit too precious. I do not have a degree, and I don't regret that at all. Am I just being a bit precious about it, Alex?
No, I don't think so. I think part of I wouldn't use the same words that you use, but I do think that the notion that people who don't have a degree are effectively worthless in the workforce is a terribly negative message.
Well, there you go. Amen to that. Terry says, I like your dress, Michelle. What have you come at? I think I've come dressed as the set background today. I'll be honest, I've decided to go incognito, camouflage and blend right in. I think it's just so I could get away from you, I'll be honest, John. Right, I'm only teasing. Look, that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've enjoyed the debate. Who's this? John telling me he can't afford fish and chips anymore. He says it's a tenner a portion.
Lentil and chips.
It was lentil and chips, that's what you need. Right, that's all I've got time for, everybody. You have yourself a fantastic night. Apparently I'm wrong. It is Peter and not Petter. See you tomorrow, Nigel Farage.
Good evening. This is Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. It is going to turn warmer over the next few days, leading into a mixed picture for the long weekend. There will be some sunshine, but there'll also be some heavy showers. Could well be some heavy rain tomorrow from this little weather system pushing up from the southwest. Ahead of it, we've got another weather front bringing increasing cloud and maybe a little rain to the north coast of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland by morning. Bit of drizzle in the southwest, the odd shower elsewhere, but for most it's a dry night. Clearer spells across the heart of the country will allow it to turn quite chilly. The coldest conditions in northern Scotland, where a frost is again likely. Elsewhere will be down into single digits. So chilly start to Thursday, but we should see some brighter skies compared to today over North Wales and northern England, at least for a time, but generally clouding over again. Wet weather across Scotland with snow on the hills, although the central belt will probably turn drier later. And then this next weather system I talked about earlier, spreading some outbreaks of rain into parts of England and Wales. A little bit milder, but obviously it won't feel all that mild with the rain and the increasing wind. And we'll see that rain becoming more extensive through the evening. Some uncertainty about how far north it gets and how heavy it is, but many places likely to see some rain during Thursday night and as we head into Friday. You can see here actually a swirl. It's an area of low pressure that's going to edge away during Friday and take the rain with it. So yes, a damp start for many, but certainly in the west likely to brighten up on Friday with some sunny spells. Eastern areas may stay a bit glum, but it will generally turn dry. Still pretty cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere